Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Real Reds Talk, an authentic football fan channel made in Manchester. And guess who's back? Back again. It's Mr. James Rose from the Muppetiers. How are we, sir?
I am doing quite well. And how about both of you?
Yeah, that was an Eminem reference for all you young kids who are coming up and don't understand that. Sam, you remember Eminem, don't you?
How young are we talking?
I was gonna say, how young do you have to be to not know who Eminem is?
I feel like everyone thinks he's like a 60-year-old rapper who's past his time now, and he's still probably, in my opinion at least, better than the majority of them.
He's 50, isn't he? Like he's
past
50.
50.
He is,
I'm pretty
he's
sure.
on older end.
Yeah.
He's in his 50s.
Yeah. There you go then. There you go.
So, but yeah, we're not going to be talking about Eminem today, surprisingly. We are going to be talking about the Dorgu deal, which is basically pretty much done. We're just waiting for the confirmation, I'm pretty sure, unless James tells us any different. We're going to talk about the Rasmus Højlund situation, because there is a big kind of narrative spinning around him at the moment. We want to touch on PSR, and we're also going to get into a bit of a social media conflict, I would say. That's been emerging the past couple of days. So I'll be interested to get into
nice
that.
Little, I like this like subject thing. I gotta take some of that stuff. I like
We're
it.
upgrading. Not got the picture on the wall, like we said, but we are upgrading. So yeah, let's talk about Dorgu then, James, because that's the hottest topic or trending topic at the moment. Any details you can confirm? Any specific things that people might not know about this player?
Sure. I mean, all I can do is tell you kind of my perspective on it. They've been this whole left back thing. I've been on your guys' channel a few times, and by the way, it's another well-timed interview today. Always is, right. We get the right times as we get this deal done finally. And the left back thing is been this massive priority for months now. When Shaw got injured at the end of summer, I was told it's fucked. Like, there's talk of him coming back, all of that, but they're just like, we're done with it. The new management are quite obviously quite a bit more ruthless about these types of things than has been in the past. And I was being told the alarm bells were going. That's it. We've got to get left backs in, not just one but two, because Malacia had been out for 19 months by that point in time, something like that. And that's obviously well justified. So they've been looking at the names, looking at people to get in. People we liked: Kirkes, Nuno Mendes, obviously potential options, but very expensive, hard to get in January. And then it turned to Patrick Dorgu, who became, from Fabrizio, and big credit to him on having that at the start, saying United had added him to the list. That was really good. But it all comes down to a couple specific things that I think are important to note, which is one, in terms of the profile, right? He's a young player, but he's very physical. He's 6'2", I think. I don't know what that is in your 100 some odd centimeters or whatever.
We just say he's a big lad, typically.
Yeah, he's a big lad. He's 6'2", right? And he's physical. He's fast. He's strong. He's versatile, and that's a big part of what they're trying to correct, is getting a lot of physical players in the door. I mean, same goes for the young guy Diego Leon. He's well known to be very physical for his age, and ready to get to that level, and that's what they want. So that's a big part of why they value him highly, is that physical flooring, that physical profile, what he can bring to the table, especially given we've had two who can't get off the injury table in that position. Someone like that is very good. And they kind of just kept pressing ahead with it. It's tight money-wise, and obviously we're going to talk about PSR and all of that, but it's really tight. That being said, I've said this before about Ineos, and not really Ineos anymore, but this is Omar, this is Wilcox, the hires that they've made. They're not the type of people who are going to say, oh, we can't get our guy that we want. We're going to go pay half price for someone we don't really want just to get someone in the door. So when the stuff was coming out about Alvaro Fernandez and all of that, from my information, it was negotiations and nothing more, for in that vein. If they wanted him, they would have got him. They would have paid for him 18 million euros. He's cheap. He's been available since the start of the window. They didn't have to move Anthony to get Alvaro in there. They could have just done it day one, and we'd have a left back all month. They didn't need to free up finances. They could have afforded that. But they didn't. And he doesn't fit really the physical profile they want. I'm not saying they don't like him, but I mean, he was sold not that long ago, so they know who he is. But yeah, they just kept going ahead with it, and as I gathered it, I think it was yesterday morning. I put in one area, I mentioned that they were set to try to make up the difference with some add-ons, and basically they're just discussing the structure of those at this point in time in real detail. It comes down to things like, do you pay 33 plus 5, and the 5 is a Ballon d'Or clause, the Ed Woodward special on add-ons, right? Or can you get a little bit of a lower deal, 30 million base and 8 million, but they're 5 million, but they're more realistic. They're just appearance based things that they're going to get paid. And for United, it was important to that they keep it below a certain number, but most important is the initial fee, that they keep it below a certain number. They can afford to pay a little more if those add-ons aren't triggering till next season or the following season, then it's not a big deal, an extra 4 or 5 million. But that initial fee is real important, that they can amortize it properly and keep it low. And it looks like they probably even got the fee a little bit down on the initial fee from what they thought by making the add-ons a bit better and a bit bigger. So it sounds like it's going to be done real soon on a very good deal for United, and one that suits them, on all fronts. I think that's very good.
Yeah, what was it about Dorgu? Because we heard that sort of rumors that Amarin made him a number 1 target. What is it about him that he likes and he wants for this team? And like, how is it going to transform the way United play? Because obviously at the minute we've got 2 full backs, not very wing back like, and it's sort of stifling that sort of creativity.
Yeah, well, it's exactly that, right? I mean, we've all seen it. Amarim has too. We're better when we have attackers in the wing backs. We know that. We're better when Ahmad is playing at wing back. He can affect the game more. When Amarim came in, if you remember, I mean, the first game he played, Ahmad was at wing back. Yeah. And we had more players available back then. So clearly his priority is to have attackers at these wing back positions for most games. He would like to use them. Now, Dorgu is flexible. He's played at right wing about half the time in his career, I think, and half the time at left back. So, he fits where you get a real solid left-footed attacker on that side to provide the balance, but also who's comfortable on the ball, comfortable in the final third, comfortable where it matters. And will help really to in the build-up, will help it, but as well in the final third, and will attack and will make a big difference. So that's really the main reason, at the moment.
It's a weird kind of fine balance, isn't it, between getting the deal done. Like, so obviously you got a lot of pressure from social media, and David Ornstein touched on this today, from the fans to be like, go do it, go do it, go do it. This is your, Amarin's number 1 target. But then it's like, well, how much effect does that have long term? So for example, we'll talk about Rasmus Højlund shortly. His deal, obviously we paid £70 million from him from Atalanta, right? So going into this Dorgu deal, would this have had an effect? Would this have been a part of the negotiations? Just that kind of long-term pain, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, they're not... obviously, we can touch on this topic a little bit, but in some respects, in this ownership, at this point, don't really give a shit what the fans think about certain aspects. I'm not saying that even in a negative way, but you can tell that their mindset is like. Now, I want to be really clear on this, because I've talked to people within the club at very high levels, not Ineos, but at the club at high levels. It's not like they don't want to respect the fans, that they don't want to communicate with them. They do. They actually think it's very important. But that doesn't mean they're still not going to go ahead with the decisions that they're going to make regardless, because from their perspective, it's the best thing for the club. And that applies twofold to football. On the football front specifically, I'm not talking about tickets and the things that are truly about the fans, right? I'm talking really purely from a football perspective. They really, really are not of the opinion that fans should have any influence on the decisions they make there. And to be fair, I think that is completely correct, because that's what they're there for. That's their job, right? Is to analyze the situation, analyze the players, analyze the finances, and see what is the best deal that's going to help United from a football perspective more than anything. do it, and they're the experts. You know, they have way more info than we do, than any of us have access to, in terms of players. How are they doing? Our own players, how are they doing in training? What are their physical levels like? What are their, you know, injury levels like? All of that, as well as the players that they're looking at in terms of how they value them. They have access to so much more. I mean, I've asked at times to say, like, I mean, we all know it's obvious that everybody got trade secrets. Well, they obviously have their own, in terms of the ways that they look at things and evaluate things, and that's what makes it pretty impossible to explain it to fans. Because what are you going to do? Come out and say, well, we have this way of evaluating players based on their value, and this is the formula we use, and things like that? Because one, that's your, you know, that's like your business secrets, right? That's like your secret sauce that you have. You don't want it all out there. And two, it's not going to make sense to anybody anyway. So, you know, it's a balance, obviously, because what they really don't want to do, as I said, similar to like the Alvaro thing from my info, is they don't want to do short-term decisions and waste money, you know. And that's why I also said I don't think they're really looking at loans at the start of the window. As I heard it, they wanted permanent deals if they were going to spend any money, because a loan is a waste of money, right? If it's not going to turn into a permanent, it's a waste. You're throwing money down the drain that you're not getting back later, and you're just pissing it away for 6 months. Now that's good if you really need that 6 months.
I was going to say, what if you're replacing a player? If you're replacing an attacking player, like Rashford and Garnacho go. You know?
Exactly. In that case, it's like, okay, we have to have it, but we're getting financially, that's because we're getting money back. You know, we're not just going to go get a loan because we want to, you know, get a little bit of position in the Premier League or something. They would do it on the basis of, is it a player we might want to buy later so we can get like a trial run, you know, and we'll want to negotiate maybe an option on it or buy them in summer. Or if it's like we don't have time to replace a player, but we're getting a big financial windfall from getting Rashford's 350,000 a week off, we don't have time to go buy somebody. We can get someone in at least to cover the position, and we're still benefiting financially. It's not just throwing money down the drain. So long-term decisions are really, really, really key to them, that we don't end up saddled with things that are problems down the line. I mean, it's good we got Anthony out on loan for 84% of his wages or so, but we're still paying for that 80 million. So it's like, you don't want to make those mistakes.
No. Just to go back to Højlund. Me and Nick had a bit of a debate after, was it after the game, Nick, or was it on his show?
Straight after the game.
Yeah, after the game. Which a thrilling Fulham game. I'm sure you watched it and tried not to fall asleep. But
I reviewed it on my like watch along thing where they have the replay.
What the hell did you talk about?
It took about 5 minutes.
Just like through the tumbleweeds going past the thing.
The thing grabs like shots, corners, all of that, and there was like
shots
on the list. I was like, oh shit, this is gonna be. I'm gonna have to yap a lot to fill the time here because I don't know what to show anybody. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
But yeah. Højlund's clearly struggling in this team. Like, he's clearly not having a good time. And my argument was his strength is he's a channel runner. He likes to spin in behind, get some space from the centre back, and like run onto balls. But what it seems like he's doing is there's a long ball going up to him. He's wrestling a centre back. His first touch is poor, and then he's getting like bowled over by the centre back. Is this Højlund choosing to do this because he's been told that you need to work on this part of your game and now he's just so obsessed with it? Or is this tactically he's being told to do, you have to do this to help the team? Because I thought we played out from the back and that's how we were going to do it, but Onana's launching long balls. So either way, we're just wasting Onana and Højlund at this point in both of their profiles, aren't we? Or is this something they're choosing to do on their own?
It's in essence, I believe that it's a little bit more down to the opponents are forcing it because it's a weakness in our team. You know, I kind of broke this down against Southampton because they did it really well also. That was the last game Højlund started before this. It was really poor. Xerxes comes on, makes huge difference. Suddenly we get back in that game and we go on to win, right? And it's a little bit of a choice. So, you know, Southampton, it was really obvious because they also play back three, that they were able to really match us man for man, building out the back, where their fullbacks are on our fullback, or you know, their wingbacks are on our wingbacks, their three forwards are on our center backs. And when that's happening, the space that's really available, that's just available to us in the press is like in front of our midfielders and behind our striker. That's where there's like a big gap of space. And we keep kicking the ball into that space.
Yep.
And Højlund keeps losing the ball in that space. When Xerxes comes on, he runs into that space. He wins it, and then he turns and gets us up the pitch, and we're able to get out of the press. So, you know, it's a little bit about, sometimes with press, you have to take what the defense gives you. Essentially, you have to take what's there, right? Because there's always going to be a gap when teams are pressing you. There's going to be somewhere there's a gap that you have to exploit, and I think teams are doing it because we can't do it. You know, like that space is there. So when Xerxes comes on, they actually stop pressing us in the same way as soon as he starts winning those balls, because then they're in danger, you know, of being able to play through them. So they drop the press off. So it's kind of like, this is a bit of the tactical battle, I think, and it's a weakness of Højlund to do that. So what's the solution? Because everybody will just do that to us, right? So on the one hand, he's got to get better at it, because he has to be able to win some of them to get the press off of him a little bit, right? He can't be losing every single time.
No.
And having the ball bounce off of his foot. Like, no striker can get away with that. You have to be at least decent in the hold up and in the build up. Otherwise, teams do just collapse on you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And then the other factor is, I think, twofold, and I think it ties into this left wing back situation. You know, and again, I watched a whole lot of Sporting, so I understand it, because one of the routes out is having that striker run into those channels, into those wide channels, and sending the ball long to them, which Højlund is good at. And there's a few times in those games we did do that to him, and he was able to run into the channels, not necessarily getting on goal, it doesn't matter, but you get into the channel, you get the team forward, you let everybody else catch up, and you lay it off to somebody if you can't get on goal, right? And you know, and so if, when we have a natural left back where the angles for passes are a bit different, where you don't have to cut inside and into traffic to try to send those balls down, but you can kind of hit them down the line, I think it'll open up a few more of those runs for Højlund down both sides to do that. And then the other factor that I got to say, and this is a huge issue to me that I saw, is, and this is the question of whether Garnacho fits into this team. When he sits wide on the touchline, there's nowhere for Højlund to run in behind him because the defense is out there. When the 10s come narrow and come deep, it opens the space up for Højlund to run in behind and provide kind of a vertical threat. And that's where there's a balance kind of issue. We saw it really bad against Fulham, I think, where he was out wide and Mazraoui kept running into like the middle 10, and it was useless. We were getting nowhere, and they even shifted it later on, which actually led to the goal. So it's you know, it's never one person at fault. Like, I think Højlund has been pretty poor, and he needs to improve in his hold up, and he needs to improve in these areas, because any striker in the Premier League has to have variation to their game. They have to be successful. But it's also a tactical issue, you know, and a personnel issue in the whole team that results in it being very one-dimensional and allows teams to kind of force us into that. So that's my long-winded answer to your question there.
No, it's good, the detail and stuff. But yeah, we I think a lot of us were losing our heads with Højlund just consistently losing the ball.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, it becomes reactionary online, and people are, Højlund's useless. He's not shit. He does have to improve this side of his game, but tactically, we don't have the players to play this system. So we're just getting.
For me, though, if I can, just on this Højlund thing, to give my balance side of it as well.
Yeah,
you talk about a player here who's, when the ball is played into him, right? I know he's not one of those who can hold centre-backs off and bring it in. It's not his natural game, right? But first and foremost, you're a striker for Manchester United, and £70 million was spent on you. So your first touch better be good. When the ball is played into him, the passing networks that are within him, the two 10s like you was touching on, if it isn't Garnacho playing, for example, and the two midfielders are very close to him. These are simple dynamics of football. So people are right, in my opinion, to criticise Rasmus, because he has been absolutely no way near it. And not only that, our attackers at the moment, Xerxes and Højlund, the combined goals they've got at a minute together is the exact same as Gavardio all season.
Yeah.
That is a huge fucking problem, tactically or ability-wise. I don't think both of them at the minute are not up to the standard, in my opinion.
Of course, totally agreed, yeah.
Just to add on to Nick's as well, I think it was on the overlap debate today, or maybe it was on the Athletic podcast, but basically in XG-wise, in the whole of the Premier League, Xerxes 71st for expected goals, and Højlund is like 121st for expected goals. And that just tells you everything, that there's just opportunities and chances are just not happening at all.
Yeah, we don't create enough, and at the moment, for sure, it's a little bit of almost a self-fulfilling prophecy too, because with Højlund on, we can't get out to create. With Xerxes on, we get out a little bit better, but then, he's
There's
not
no number 9 in the box. Yeah,
he's not as traditionally a number 9, so we have to solve it a different way. And it is correct that neither of them, both of them at the moment, have a big distinct weakness in their game that are almost polar opposite to each other. And that doesn't make either of them good enough, even though I would say at the moment Xerxes helps the team a bit more in terms of control. That doesn't mean it solves the problem. It doesn't solve it on its own. I like Xerxes. I think he potentially could grow into that, into being better in the box and things like that, because he's obviously really talented for a player of his size. Some of the things he can do are quite incredible, but neither of them have performed to the standards. And frankly, they want to see how it goes the rest of the year. And there's not a zero chance that one of them goes in summer to replace with a top, more all-round striker that actually gets the job done.
Yeah. Could you play them together, James? Do you reckon, with Xerxes? And
I thought of that too. I've kind of wanted to see it. Get Ahmad at wing back. Get Højlund off the right, since he's left-footed a little bit, running beyond Xerxes, so you have a little bit of verticality in there, and keep Bruno up front with him as well for some playmaking. I don't know if it would work, but I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it given a try. I mean, it's not like 2 striker formations are impossible, and both of them played in Italy, where it's pretty damn common. So you'd expect they might actually suit them kind of well. That dynamic works well in Italy.
For sure. Wanted to move on to PSR and sort of spending, because every time I put a story up, or every time I sort of put a post out, people are like, just sell him, just buy him. Why are we not doing this? Why are we not doing that? Can you give people a basic sort of understanding of PSR and FFP? Because I get comments like, oh, we just need to go get Osman, or just swap in with this, just sell Shaw, just sell Mount. Can you break down, besides the obvious that life isn't Football Manager or FIFA, like why United are in this mess of like, we can't go out and just spend, and why the financials are restricting us from just going out to do that?
So I think it was Sunday morning. I did a live, and I did about like a 30-minute financial lesson on United, walking through like every little thing in detail. It was
the
pretty
prep
funny.
for that
and
must have been fucking Jesus.
Oh yeah, it was good. People really liked it. It was probably my most well-received live in like years, because it was just so I recommend anybody watch that if you want a deep dive.
Yeah, go do it.
But the simplicity of it is that PSR is profit and sustainability, and the whole goal behind it is that clubs should be somewhat self-sufficient, right? Because what they don't want is a situation where owners can pump endless money in, and then the clubs at the bottom that cannot pump endless money in, because you have very wealthy owners at the top of the Premier League. It's not like that through the rest of the pyramid. Not everybody in the rest of the football pyramid has even Ineos money, if you would want to use a comparison to our owners. 76 billion, I think the company's worth. That you can pump money in endlessly, drive the market up, drive everything up, and that's how you keep the club functioning. You just spend more, pump more, spend more, pump more. It ruins the whole football economy. It ruins the whole pyramid. And then you have clubs at the bottom that can't self-sustain, right? Because they have to spend so much, wages get inflated. And we saw it, with things like post the Neymar transfer, stuff like that, with PSG and such pumping money in. It inflated the market by triple or double, what it was before. And it made it really tough even for smaller clubs, where previously if they had to pay 5K a week in the championship, now they got to pay 15. That makes a huge difference to smaller clubs, right? So it's really about the whole pyramid. It's not just about the Premier League, but what they don't want is clubs going into administration, clubs, at the top end of the best competition, just losing so much money. You know what I mean? And so that's why the rule exists. It has its flaws in its application, but the rule exists so that you can only lose a certain amount, and then the owner can invest a certain amount, and it counts against that. So it's still a lot. United are allowed to lose 105 million over the span of 3 years. Yeah. That's after deducting things like your spend on the women's team, on the academy, and on certain other aspects that you're allowed to deduct. United have lost 300 million over the last 3 years in actual money. In actual money, real world money, they've lost 300 million over the last 3 years. When you look at it, it's like 150, 50, and 120 or something like that in actual money that they've lost. Okay, so they've been able to deduct certain things from that. There were COVID credits, losses that you were able to write off because COVID, caused income loss and things like that out of your control. There was the deductions that were able to be used. There was all of that to get them within the rules of 105 million in losses. But the problem is they're just spending too much. They're just spending too much. It's like you get paid every month and you spend more than that. That's all that's happening. They're just spending way too much money. And when you look at revenue, it's not that easy to bring in more money. How do you bring in more money? Well, a lot of it's shit that's real unpopular, right? Which is some of the things they're talking about. Ticket prices, because that's a huge part of your revenue. You can't change TV deals, which is where most of your money comes from. That's negotiated at the big level. You can't do anything about that. That's just what it is, right? At this point in time, most of the money you cannot change that comes in. And then you have huge match day revenues as a big portion of United's income because they have the biggest stadium, right? Or near the biggest stadium, right? It's a huge portion of United's revenue. It's one of the main things that keeps United extremely relevant. And at the top is the amount of money that can be generated from ticket sales. So you look at that and say, well, if we raise ticket prices, then we get more money in. Well, that's one way to balance it that is extremely unpopular, as we know, right? People really don't want to pay more, especially given the quality of play that we've seen and Old Trafford's fallen down and all this kind of shit, right? So it's understandable why fans are upset about that. But then what do? You raise revenue or you cut costs. If you're not making enough money, you need a better paying job or you need to spend less money every month, to balance the books because they have to be balanced. And United have been spending.
Can I pick at your one point of that, James, if that's okay? Yeah. So the situation with the manager is obviously something that gets thrown a lot with the hiring of Eric Ten Hag. Well, not hiring, but sticking with him, and then going to spending 20 odd million getting Ammer in as well. So people will then rightfully so point to that and say, well, how much money is that going to save you?
Dan Ashworth as well, hiring him, paying money out to get him the king, and then firing him as well. That's costing money.
That's a lot of money that could have been saved.
I mean, bear in mind one thing in particular, okay? Amram would have, I think, cost more in the last summer. So if Amram was the guy, money-wise, it didn't make that much of a difference. In terms of Ten Hag, it probably makes a little bit, but not as much as people are thinking. But all in all, I think we paid 3 million for Ashworth at the end of the day too, right? So that's 3 million down. Realistically, they've wasted 8. Now, is that okay? Is that great? No. But we've been losing 100 million a year, right? So it's like it's not the reason why we're struggling financially in that difficult situation. And there's also another little matter on this point, right? Which is that, look, from a football perspective, you're never going to get everything right, 100% right. Every transfer is not going to work out. City have bought many players that haven't worked out. They were able to spend 100 million on Jack Grealish. Look at Chelsea, how many players they can buy that turn into flops, right? You're never going to get 100% in football. The problem is United have been losing so badly and making so little money and riding the edge that you have to get 100% right, but you can't. You just can't. Like, you have to be afforded the ability to make mistakes on the football side because you're going to. There's not a club on earth that gets it 100%, right? I mean, Real Madrid bought Jovic. We were just talking about this earlier, but Real Madrid bought Jovic for 70 million, and he was a flop. Every club makes bad transfers or makes bad mistakes and things like that. The issue is when your finances are so bad that you can't afford to make those mistakes, well, what do you do then? Because there's no way to guarantee something's going to work out in football. It's always, United need wiggle room because they need to be able to get 70% right. If they can get 70% right, they're doing really well. So you have to have the wiggle room to make that 30% of mistakes if you're going to get where you want to get to, right? Every club has to be able to. And that's really been the issue. And so they've been losing so much. Now, you have a few factors in this. One is obviously the Glazer debt that's on there, which is a real problem, right? It costs about 20 to 25 million a year. Now, one of the things that's I think was misunderstood by certain things that were out there is that it's United paid like 180 million in interest payments over the last 3 years.
Which could pay for a stadium.
All right, yeah, that's not all the Glazer debt. Now I'm putting that in quotes because the Glazers are responsible for the whole situation, so I'm not absolving them. That's not that all that interest was not even close to what it like. That was not all that initial buy that they put on the club, right? This debt we've been saddled with for 20 years.
Yep.
That was about 20 million of that a year, so a significant amount, but not the 60 million a year. So if you're losing money every month and you have to go and you're still spending, what are you spending it on? You're spending it on a credit card, right? You're buying it on a credit card or you're taking out a loans. It's the extra loans on top, the extra credit, this credit line that we have, 300 million that we've been drawing down in full, is being used to keep the club running. But you have to pay interest on that. You've got to pay finance costs on that. So the more negative you get, the more money you have to borrow, the more it costs you, and you end up in this never-ending downward loop of losing more and more money. And so one thing I have to correct a little bit is the 300 million from Sir Jim Ratcliffe has actually affected our debt quite positively, which is that by injecting that money in, the cash flow means we don't have to borrow money as much to live, to be functional.
Is that out of his own pocket though, or is that not equity?
It is. It is equity, which is good because he needs that, takes more over from the Glazers, but that goes into the club. That went into the club, not to the Glazers. That's the important part. It did go into the club, right? So that 300 million that goes into the club helps the club run, even though it was losing money. You know, it's like you put 100 on a credit card and someone gives you $100, you can pay the credit card off, right? If you couldn't do that, then you're going to be paying interest on that credit card for the next year, as long as it takes you to pay it off. So that helps, and that should actually reduce our finance costs a lot this year. That we'll see when they end up at the end of this year balancing the books. So that investment actually does help and has helped quite a bit. But the other factor is just cutting costs. I made the comparison. United spend more than 100 million more than Arsenal to run the club. That's outside of wages, that's outside of transfers, that's outside of everything else related to the football club itself. They just spend 100 million more. And it didn't always used to be this way. United just spend 100 million. Like, you cannot tell me it takes $100 million more to run United than it does Arsenal when you look at it, right? Especially Arsenal's in London, you'd expect things to be more expensive there to pay for things, to pay for, salaries, to pay for employees and all of that. So that's why they were saying, you know what, we have 250 staff too many and we have to cut this down because we're just spending way too much. And when you make it in comparison to other clubs, United are. They're so vastly overinflated, overspending, and overstaffed that they have to cut these things down. So it's a balance of these factors. Cut down the overspending so that instead of 100 million being lost, you're losing 60. We can do that. We can cut 40 million from expenses just because we have to. And then the best way to increase revenue, and this is the most important way that doesn't affect fans, is to be more successful on the pitch. Because if we can get into Champions League regularly, then we're going to be making 40, 60 million more a year. And so that's really the plan. They don't want to spend less on transfers. They don't want to spend less on football, but it needs to be spent better, right? It needs to be spent way better, because if you spend the same amount of money and you don't make Champions League, or you do, then it's a 40 million difference. It's quite big. And that can be the difference between the club being viable and not viable. So they're just balancing the books on all of this. And the point where it's at right now for January is they had to make space in order to spend. They had to. They're right at the limit, like just right there on the limit. They had to make space. It's not like that in summer, in part because you get things like free agents departing. Johnny Evans comes off, Lindelof comes off, Eriksson comes off, and they'll likely make some more sales and things as well that free up space for spending. But in January, that was just really the situation. They had to, move something out in order to spend.
So just the last question on PSR, because this is a situation annoyed me a little bit with the Garnacho thing, that there's trying to find in between, is this happening because of the PSR situation, because there will be a big green tick after he's gone and it will open a massive space? Or is it a case of also as well where Amarin's looked at the player and he's identified maybe you are not the typical profile I would go for in one of these 10s. So if needs be, we can do that. But you're saying that performances on the pitch are going to increase. Everything comes hand in hand, right? It's going to increase money coming into the club. Garnacho going, and not necessarily from what we've seen a replacement. How is that a positive for the club, apart from financial?
Yeah. So your second point there is right, because look, I mean, the reality is that it's always going to be versus like cost to benefit. Does Amarim and do the club feel that the money that they would sell Garnacho for, could they replace it to be better, right? Because it's not about saving money for money's sake. It's about if they had that money. And this is a decision every manager has to make at all times, right? Because they never have unlimited funds. They always have to make decisions about their squad based on what they've got, what they could have, what they could spend, and everything. And so, it comes down to a joint decision between him and the club, and Garnacho himself, mind you, who is an important party in all of this, that has his own doubts about his situation at United, that has his own doubts about his fit at United, and that has his own doubts about whether he's going to be a long-term starter at United, right? That's a factor in this too. Same as it would be for Marcus Rashford. They didn't sell him in summer. He was worth a lot of money in summer, a lot more than he is now, right? And it would have represented a huge financial gain. So why didn't it happen? Well, he didn't want to leave. At that time, he was in discussions with the club, considering that it would, ideally for all parties, it was considered that getting him back and going was a top priority and would be the best ultimately. So it's not really just about the financials, right? But it's a comparison of, would we be better? Is this the right player for us, or is it like a maybe? And if we sell him and get good money, can we get the right player in? And that's the balance of it. But it's also, how much is that worth? Because if you sell him for 30 million, then the answer is no. You probably won't get a better player for you at 30 million. It's not going to happen, right? So that's why the price is high. They're not. I promise you this, and I can say this with 100% certainty. They have never, ever, ever forced Amarim to say someone has to be sold. Okay, they've not once told him anything like that. All right. It has all been fully in conjunction, where they gave him the responsibility to look at the squad, assess it, and determine who he thinks fits and who he thinks doesn't, and then take it from there. If Casemiro fit him, he would still be, he would be playing.
He'd be playing. Yeah.
He'd be playing, he wouldn't be figuring out anyway. If Anthony fit him, he would be playing. It's not like we made that much from Anthony, but he doesn't fit. And he doesn't really want to use him. So any amount of money we can get back is worth it, because he just doesn't want to use him. Right. So, or it's like, well, yeah, if we could get Anthony out and that means we can afford like a top young left wing back, that's a deal I'm going to do every single day as the manager. It makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah. So it's a balance, and so it doesn't make like for a clear cut, simple answer. You know what I mean? Like, not saying you're asking for that, but people always want to frame it into like, Ineos is selling Garnacho for the money, or, Amarim is being, he's being ripped out of Amarim's hands, or Amarim wants to kick him out. It's nothing like that. It's honest and frank discussions between all parties of what's the best thing for everybody. And to a degree, at a certain price, it's for Garnacho to leave and to replace him with someone who fits better. And it's the thing about it too, this is where PSR is a bit funky. It's not just replace him with one player. The space that Garnacho would make funds the entire summer, and so that's part of the balance of it too, is it's like you could spend 150 million if you sell a player like Garnacho. So it's that balance, and that's, again, I think it's one of the oddest things about the PSR regulation in general is just how it works. I don't know what the answer to that is, but it certainly makes it so you almost have to consider selling anybody that you can make good profit on if you have any doubts about them, that you just kind of have to, and it's kind of wild. Like you're in way better shape selling Garnacho than Anthony. It doesn't make sense, but that's the way the rules work, and I think it's a huge flaw with the whole setup, because it just means you have to think this way, and ideally you wouldn't have to think this way at all, you know.
Well, that's basically how Chelsea are making money, isn't it? They just go scoop up young English academy talents, buy a shit ton of them, put them out on loan, bring some of them to think, okay, his value's risen, sell him. That's pure profit because he's an academy player, and you just keep rinsing it over and over again.
Business
and that's
commodities.
That's what they do. That's exactly their business model. Yeah. And I think a lot of United fans are worried about Ineos going down that road, and I think they think Garnacho's the start of that, and then Kobe Mainoo's the next one, and then they're going to start. That's how they're going to start it.
And look, there's a balance. There's a balance. You do need to. It is good business, and it makes good business sense to sell some young players when, you know, they're not working. I mean, you look at it like, do we sit here and have regrets? We sold Alvaro Fernandez and made some money. No. You know, it's not a big deal. We saw Willy Kambwala in the summer. It's not a big deal. You know, these types of players, right, that are kind of where in past years they might have sat rotting on the bench or in the under-21s for way too long and then end up leaving for free or for nothing. You know, when at a certain point they were kind of hyped. You look at like the Angel Gomez's where what was the point of all of this? You know, you develop this great young talent for 10 years, you lose them for nothing. You know, because they're just, you know, and so it's a balance where why lose those players for nothing? Why not be able to, you know, have that help sustain the club as well? But I do promise you that like the Garnacho thing is not like that. It's really not like that at all. That's just very ordinary business of like, you have a player who, you know, you might consider isn't the right fit that has value, you can sell, you know, you can sell them. If whether he was an academy player or not, it's the fact that he's a good player with value and potential that doesn't quite fit. And that's the main reason they're selling him. If he fit really well into Amorim's system and there was confidence, he wouldn't be in question of being sold at all. So it has nothing, you know, like you can draw the lines between him being an academy kid and not, but that's actually pretty irrelevant to the situation is I guess what I'm saying in there. Because if he fits, he fits. If he doesn't, then the manager will look to upgrade, and then you look at where can we make money on sales. Every club will look at where they can make money on sales.
Just before you dive into the last bit, Sam, I just want to say, Sam, random guy gifted 5 memberships, so appreciate you, brother. He's a legend of this channel, and always appreciate those kind of sentiments. Everyone else is in the chat as well. Big up if you've got any questions for James towards the end. We will dive into a bit of a live Q&A. I think that's going to be interesting in itself. But yeah, I appreciate you all. If you can leave a like on the video for us and subscribe, that would also be absolutely amazing. But yeah, Sam, sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, 324 people in the chat. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You drew a nice crowd today, huh? Yeah.
It's always, when you come on, James, it's always ridiculous. Even some of the comments, but we'll leave them ones. Speaking of ridiculous, social media. There's been a bit of a couple of feuds on social media this week.
It's still going. It's still going while we're on this video.
I know.
I've not seen this.
No, Ornstein and Romano went at each other, didn't they, with different reports over Japan. He's going to City, he's going to Arsenal. Who knows? And then, of course, Mr. Mark Goldbridge, if that is his real name, which it isn't, has gone at yourself in the social media landscape. Because obviously, you got yours. Did you get your start on Twitter? Like, is that how you sort of came up on Twitter, or were you on Discord?
No, I came through Reddit. Yeah, actually.
Reddit, okay.
And then in Discord, and then Twitter.
Yeah.
Twitter was
so Reddit is very similar atmosphere to what X is, and Twitter is now reactionary, very clickbait and stuff like that.
I left there a few years back. Yeah,
I don't blame you.
Since Mr. Nazi sort of took over, it has got a lot worse. But do you find it weird that a guy like Goldbridge, with the platform that he has, like he has millions of people following his stuff, do you find it weird that he's targeting somebody like you, or does it give it confidence that your info is reaching like such a wider audience, and somebody like him is taking notice that you're sort of poking holes in his sort of things that he's trying to put out and put a certain spin on?
It's mostly the latter. This has kind of been ongoing really since the takeover process. During the takeover process, and even before it, I had really, really, really accurate information from kind of start to finish. And obviously, as I've said before, a lot of it came from quite obviously nearer to the Ineos side of things in terms of what was going on and what was happening. And I put out very accurately, very directly everything that I knew and heard, and have pretty much since then. But for some people, they can't really handle the idea that someone else in sort of the fan space might actually know better than them on certain things. It's hard work. It's hard work to get to the position of knowing anything, frankly.
Yeah, because
And
everyone
United are
wants it,
really
right?
tight. Yeah. And United are really tight. They're really tight with fan channels and things like that. They really don't give much out, if anything. And it's like, it is what it is. But at the end of the day, it's all business to me. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
Whatever drives interactions, whatever drives views, whatever drives outrage, that's the business model. That's what works on social media. That's what works on YouTube for the most part. And that's what I don't engage in. But some people do. I know that's what you don't engage in. That's why I come on your channel. And that's what I respect. That's the point to me. Is to always be extremely, extremely authentic on these things. And that's natural to provide conflict. But I think a lot of people are seeing a bit how ridiculous it is, some of these things.
He's already attacking Dorgu, isn't he? He's already sort of and stuff like that. And you're just like, mate, he's not even playing.
He's having a go at Academy Scoop today on Twitter.
I
saw a little bit. Like, come on, man.
I think it is
getting ridiculous.
There is a blueprint in this. Whatever people want to say, the algorithm of especially football media is negative wins over a lot of stuff, which is unfortunate. Because people like yourself, tension, James, with informative stuff. Not to say you haven't got a big traction, because you obviously have.
Sure.
But with concrete stuff, people want more kind of nonsensical transfer stuff than actual. Do you know what I mean? Like down to the wire. That it's taken me days to get this information to put it out, and that's the hard world that we live in. Even as creators, I think we can all kind of agree on that. As creators, it's hard because there's a fine balance between it. Having said that, who will win in a boxing match between? No, I'm only joking. Can I...
I won't get into that because
no, I'm joking.
None of it to me. No, I know you're joking. None of it to me I take personally anyway. I mean, it's the internet. What are you gonna do? I grew up out of taking the internet too seriously a long time ago.
Yeah. Can I just get your overall thoughts though on channels like the United Stand and just impacts on the community, because there's a large portion of United fans at the minute, and not coming from ourselves, well, a bit of it has, but other people as well. It just feels like it's a very agenda-driven, negative kind of nonsense that's spewed out there to kind of, I don't know, it feels like a kind of a black mark on the United community, and they'll say they use it for positive, and they'll say whatever they want, right, and that's fine, they can slander us, whatever. But there is this view on it at the moment. It just feels like it's very toxic, and a lot of stuff comes out of there, and they're a big part of it with the following that they've got.
I think so. I mean, I think in general, it's like when you have a big following. I'm one that will admit that there's a lot of influence. That these, some people will sit and say it doesn't matter. These guys don't have any influence. People don't have any influence. And try to pass them off as tiny. No, they've done an amazing job in that respect of building something really fucking big, right? Absolutely. Really big. They've done an amazing job at that. It's quite incredible, right?
Yeah.
It has influence. It has massive influence on the fan base, and on the discourse around it. There was a lot of the same criticism of Arsenal Fan TV when, as sort of the original on this, on how negative and how toxic it created the environment. And they were connected with some of the players that were in there, for some time. And it made this messy whole setting and dressing room, and it kind of spiraled. And obviously, I think it's actually calmed down a bit on the Arsenal Fan TV side over the years. But I remember that being a bit of the discourse back then around them, that it was so... It was kind of chaos, and it was causing problems and things like that. And I think United's in a little bit of the same boat at this point in time. It's like it's so negative, the things. It's unbelievable. Like, look, I get criticism of things like that, but when you go 20 years with the Glazers and everything that's happened, what's the point? In being. And just everything has to be so toxic so quickly on every subject, rather than it being, honest discourse, honest discussion, honest, engagement over things without preconceived notions. And it feels like a lot of the community is run on a basis of like whatever the starting opinion was we've got to say whatever is possible to make sure that that's what happens and that's what's right, rather than it just being just objective analysis and look at things. And I think a lot of it is personally driven. I mean, when you talk about fan channel stuff, I don't understand how it makes sense to be going on and on about attacking the price of a 30 million player when you've given an interview to a player who follows you on social media that cost 72 million from the same league and was less experienced. Like, what is sense. That? Like, that doesn't make sense. And it's fine. Great for you. You have a player who follows you, who talks to you, who you do an interview with. Awesome. I'd love to do it with a player. I would, it's like, cool. But I'm not going to go attack another player at the same time and start to make this huge thing on this basis, to prove some point. Like, what? It doesn't make any sense to me. These types of things. And that's where it goes off and stops being objective and stops being about, just fans being a community and coming together, and starts being about trying to accomplish something. And I don't know exactly what it is. But I worry. I see United fans a lot that I think, more than anything, I think United fans get played quite a bit, because the negativity pays money, and the negativity sells, and everything that goes into that just definitely has remuneration for other people, and it's been happening in the papers for a long time. So it's not like the blueprint of this started with fan channels. It's been happening in the papers for ages. They've been doing things that. So, it's like that's the model.
You remember Beckham after the World Cup? They had a dartboard with his face on it, and all
United fans used to stick together to protect. The players from this stuff. They used to stick together to protect the club from the outer attacks of the media and things like that. And I think that's one of the big changes that has happened. Is it's kind of the opposite now. Now it's like
based on it.
Yeah, well, like turn on them as quick as possible. Yeah.
I think it's a very talk sport model. A lot of ones are going down that route, whether it's controversial, whether it's going against the grain. It just works. Yeah. It does. Whether people like it or not.
It does. It's business, It
is business ones. We said we'll do the last kind of questions from the chat. Sorry, I was reading one out there. I was like, what on earth is that? Some mad stuff in the chat. But yeah, go on, Sam, if you want to run through some of them.
Yeah, I've got a couple. I think we touched on Garnacho, so we can go through that. James, should we expect a busy summer or an anticlimax? That's from James Brogogan.
We'll definitely do some big business. In the summer. We'll definitely do some big business.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
In the summer, there's no doubt about that. There's that you're going to get the same stories, that we don't have much to spend, and there's some truth in that, but we're freeing up wages
every year. The same line, isn't it?
I'm going to put it on our news ticker.
It's what it is, like it's whatever. But and especially we'll do decent business. If we can shift any players, we'll do big business, and I expect that. And by bigger players, I mean if we can shift Rashford, Casemiro, big wages, these players, and then we'll see what happens with Garnacho. Any of those really allow for a significant amount of spending on top of what we can do already.
Shout out to Elite Baller. It says, James, is there a chance to get both Garnacho and Rashford still here after the January window shuts? If so, would Rashford still not be part of the squad?
There's a chance, because why wouldn't there be? Clubs have to make an offer that is suitable to sell. Or even for a loan, I think there's a better chance at this stage that Rashford leaves because of just everything, right? For all the reasons that we know, and because it can be on loan. We're not going to loan Garnacho out. It can be on loan, and I think that we probably reach a point where, not that the club would like anybody to say this, but where we'd be fine subsidizing 80% of the wages, if it just meant he was on loan. Because what good is it for him to stick around at this point with everything that's happened, right? So we'll probably reach that point with Rashford, and I do expect he will go. But there's obviously a chance that neither goes. I mean, who knows what's going to happen on that front? It's up to the other clubs.
I didn't want to ask this, but it was the talk of social media yesterday. Pogba, any truth in that? Please say no.
Bullshit.
Does it make sense to you? That's all. No, like all these financials we've just talked about. Does it make sense to anybody?
So many people going on about it.
I can't knock it down, but it's only because I've literally not heard a single peep that it would make absolutely any sense to anybody out of it. Right? That it would happen.
Yeah. What was the vote, by the way?
Yeah, we put a vote up this afternoon, and it was 50-50, and I was like, my brain is fucking
Idiots.
fried. 50-50 people were bringing back. I was like astonished.
Crazy.
They weren't
People
here,
have
were they,
that
when he was
nostalgia
back?
brain, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They have like you remember the good, which to be fair is a good trait as a
He had
human being
moments.
to think
Yeah.
positively.
Yeah.
You remember the good, not the bad. There was a lot of bad.
Yeah, there's a lot. Random guy, can Ineos pump money into the United by sponsoring their own jerseys or selling the name rights to themselves, something like that? I'm pretty sure that's what City are being charged with, to be honest, random
If
guy.
City win the
Yeah.
case, yeah.
It's debatable. It's debatable, and that's the truth, right? It's debatable. Now the shirts, there's nothing we can do on the shirts because we already have the best shirt sponsor deal in the world, I think, or in the country. And you have to do fair market value. You can't just go. That's already a rule. You know, you cannot sponsor yourself for 50 million more than you'd be getting now, and it'd be acceptable. You get penalized for that, and you'd only be able to account for what would be fair market value. We're already getting fair market value. Nobody wants to sponsor Old Trafford in its current state. Okay,
No.
People will want to pay for Old Trafford naming rights on a new stadium.
Yep.
Not now. It's not a subject for now. There's no point in even trying to sell it now because nobody's going to want to do that. They would definitely do it on a new stadium. Or if they did now, you get peanuts for it because the stadium is not very impressive. And who wants their name outside of something that's rusting and falling down all the time, right?
It's like sponsoring a crack house, isn't it? It's just like you're not helping yourself there. Like, it's just not helping. James, given our fan base, should there be more United fan channels coming from the USA? That's from Punch Paint.
No, because the US fan base is tiny. It's tiny relative to other English clubs, and it's kind of depressing. And it's something that United need to do better at. And one of the reasons they've been coming to the US more often, especially with the World Cup coming here, and that they'll be back this summer. They need to build the fan base up in the US. It's so small, the United fan base here compared to Liverpool and Arsenal. You can imagine how depressing that is. It's bad. They need to improve it for sure. So that's the main reason why it's just a numbers game. There's not that many American fans, you know, and that makes me, and not being braggadocious, but far and away the biggest American channel in the world by some margin, and that's kind of wild when you think about it.
Yeah,
it's just because there's not that many.
It's hard work trying to convince them now. Imagine youngsters coming up. Do you want to support this club? And that's
the
ones that
issue,
are
right?
14th playing shit football. Like,
yeah, the ones that are shit that win nothing. You know, and here Arsenal's their owners are here, right? The Kroenkes here in Denver, where I live, so they get a little bit of extra from that. Right. But the Glazers completely ignore United in Tampa, so they haven't even helped promote them in the States either. They just completely ignore them. They pretend they don't exist in the US.
I don't know if there was any truth to this story, but I saw it going around where they didn't want United to come and play at their new stadium because the training facilities are so
probably
fantastic.
Totally true.
They were like, we don't want them to see it.
No, listen,
why are they like this?
I lived in Tampa, and it's wild because in Tampa, the Glazers are almost idealistic owners. They've got museums for kids. They invest in the city. You know, they put all this money in there. They've got all this stuff, and they've built a new stadium, and they've rehashed all of this, and they've actually brought the Buccaneers to a more competitive team over the last some years from being the worst team in the NFL. And then you go to United, and it's like, you know, it's kind of unbelievable in the comparison between how they treat the two clubs. So I 100% believe that story to be true.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
Final question, Punch Pay. James, do you think we could win the Europa League?
Yeah, absolutely do. Why not?
Why not?
Competition's not that bad. I mean, what's it going to be? Tottenham? Like, fuck that. It's Tottenham, right?
You think we're shit, and then you look down in the league table and you go, oh, actually, we've got Spurs below us who are even worse than us and are losing to Everton. My God.
And Leicester as well. Did you see that Leicester game? That was fucking ridiculous, that game.
Shocking. Absolutely shocking.
I reckon Amram goes on the Jose first season arc on this, and we get that Europa League done and give the league up, and that's fair enough to me. It's worth it.
Put all your eggs and the chicken in the basket. That's what I say for the Europa League.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wow. What an absolute jam-packed show, just hitting the hour mark, so perfectly timed as well, if I do say so myself. James, I don't need to tell you, you know, we always love having you on. It's always a really good, in-depth, detailed chat with humour and information as well. Just let you guys know we're watching in a minute. We have a guest on Thursday who I know James is a fan of as well. We've not... Should we say it, Sam?
No. So don't say it, but he's not going to be on Thursday. We're going to record it Thursday. And then it's going to be put out. Should we put it out Thursday after the game, or should we put it out Friday morning?
Friday morning. I'd say.
Okay. Yeah, so it's going to be out Friday morning, but we will be recording it Thursday. So please do
Nice.
put your notification bells on because you won't want to miss this. It's going to be good.
Be a
Here's
decent
your
one.
clue. Your clue is we're collecting the 3rd Infinity Stone. So that's your clue. So
There you
work
go.
that one out.
There it is, people. Thank you so much to everyone who's tuned in and watched, everyone who's come over from James' channel. Obviously, James, what's the plan this week now for your content? Anything coming up?
I'll have a video or a live in just a little bit after this to just catch up on everything on my channel. So if you want to come listen to me for another hour, about 30 minutes from now, then come hop on over. Otherwise, tomorrow, regular video, I believe a little tactics show, watch along and all of that. The daily stuff Thursday. I'll probably do quite a number of longer lives this week, given the last week of the window, just in case anything else happens. And now that I've got my home office, I'll be on the weekends, Saturday, Sunday morning, every day. Every day you can expect to hear from me now.
It is,
How was that? How was that watch along for the Fulham game? Was that a tough one?
It was a rough one. I enjoy them, but because if I was by myself, I probably would have ended up scrolling my phone and missed the entire game because it was such a bore. You know what I mean? If I was just sitting at home, so better with company, I guess. than sitting alone and watching that. Because holy, yeah.
United, yeah, thank you to everyone for watching. Appreciate every single one of you. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and a big thank you to James.